So this is the introductory video to the executive topic within A-level politics, and we're going to start by just having a little look at the introduction, have a little background to the role of the Prime Minister and the executive within the government. Okay, so the Prime Minister, so the executive branch of government concerned with the formulation and implementation of policy. Okay, in the UK. Parliamentary system of parliamentary government, okay, all ministers are drawn from Parliament and are accountable to it. We talked about that in an earlier video in the Parliament topic. The Prime Minister and Cabinet are the main institutions within the executive branch. So the Prime Minister is what's known as the head of the government. Okay, he or she provides political leadership within the Cabinet and the UK as a whole, chairs the Cabinet, appoints ministers, and is the leader of the largest party in the House of Commons by convention only. Okay, the Queen could technically pick anybody to be the head of her government and become her Prime Minister, but the convention is that it's the party with the largest majority in the House of Commons. Robert Walpole is recognised as the first Prime Minister because he commanded a majority support in the House of Commons, and this was in 1721 to 1742. Okay, the official residence of the Prime Minister is 10 Downing Street. What is required to be a Prime Minister? There are three main requirements. Okay, he or she must be a member of the Westminster Parliament. So until the 19th century, the Prime Minister usually came from the House of Lords. Okay, this was because the Lords were seen as the upper house and the most noble of houses of the two. And as the Commons has gained power, it's become general convention that the Prime Minister comes from the House of Commons. So therefore, he or she generally must be an MP. This isn't an official legal requirement, it's a convention. He or she must be leader of a political party. The Prime Minister must have support from his or her party. And the political party that they will normally have a majority in the House of Commons. So this is done by winning a general election. Generally, okay, this is the most common way in which you gain a majority in the House of Commons. Okay. And this is always subject to election results. So with that being said, we're going to have a little look at the types of government that can be formed when we have a system like this. So we can have a majority government, and this is where one political party has an absolute majority of seats in the House of Commons and forms a government. The government ministers are members of this one party. Examples of majority governments would be Blair in 1997, that had the largest majority in history. We also have the Conservatives in 2015. There are minority governments, okay? This is where no political party has an absolute majority of seats in the House of Commons, and this normally leads to a coalition. So what's generally seen is if there is no majority in the House of Commons, the largest party tends to will form a coalition with whoever they choose, okay, or they could run the government as a minority government. However, the problem with that being is that they would not be able to get any legislation passed because it's the role of the opposition to scrutinise the government. And then you also have coalition governments. This is where no political party has an absolute majority of seats in the House of Commons. Okay, two or more parties can agree to form a government together. Examples of this could be seen in 2010 with the Conservatives and the Liberal Democrat coalition. Okay. So with that being said, what is the role of the Prime Minister? We've worked out who the Prime Minister is, what they do, and what their requirements are. What are the role that the Prime Minister has? So they have 6 main roles. Okay, these roles are not set out in statute law, but again, these are more convention. Okay, we see that most of the politics surrounding the sort of areas of Parliament and the Prime Minister being set out in convention rather than official statute law. So the first role is political leadership. The Prime Minister decides the political direction taken by the government. Okay, they set out the government's priorities and a broad strategy. And they also determine policy. The second is national leadership. So the Prime Minister is the predominant figure in UK politics, okay, and provides national leadership at times of crisis. Okay, the media will focus on the Prime Minister in times of crisis. So with this being said, that they are seen as a communicator-in-chief. Okay, so a little spin on words from Commander-in-Chief. They're a communicator-in-chief. Their third role is to appoint the government. So the Prime Minister determines the membership of his or her cabinet. When the Prime Minister appoints and dismisses cabinet ministers, this is known as a cabinet reshuffle. So he officially just shuffles the cabinet round. The fourth role is chairing the cabinet. Okay, so the Prime Minister chairs meetings of the cabinet. They set the agenda and steer the meetings. He or she also makes appointments to cabinet committees and holds bilateral meetings with ministers. This is very interesting because we'll look at the different the leadership styles of prime ministers in the last 20 or 30 so years, okay, and how they sort of ran their government, because each of them had their different ways of running it. Number 5, they manage the executive. The Prime Minister is responsible for the overall organisation of the government and is the head of the civil service. So he or she can create or merge government departments and reform the civil service. And then finally 6 is to manage relations with Parliament. So the Prime Minister makes statements to and answers questions in the House of Commons. He or she shapes the government's legislative programme. So the laws that want to be passed through Parliament, this is done by shaping the programme that the Prime Minister creates. So with that being said, we have 6 main roles of the Prime Minister. In the next few videos, we're going to look at the relationship with Parliament, we're going to look at different leadership styles, and we're going to look at the powers of the Prime Minister. Okay, so these are coming up in later videos.